We continue our series through the story of Noah and Noah's line. And we arrive at, I think, what most people wait for other than the flood story itself, which is the story of God's covenant, the Noahic covenant, God's promise to his people. So we'll be in Genesis chapter 8, verse 20, and we'll be going to chapter 9, verse 17. Verse 20 through 9:17. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord. He took some of every kind of clean animal and every kind of clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. When the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma, he said to himself, "I will never again curse the ground because of human beings. Even though the inclination of the human heart is evil from youth onward. And I will never again strike down every living thing as I have done." And he finishes chapter 8 with this beautiful poem. "As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, and day and night will not cease." Continuing with chapter 9. God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. The fear and terror of you will be in every living creature on the earth, every bird of the sky, every creature that crawls on the ground, and all the fish of the sea. They're placed under your authority. Every creature that lives and moves will be food for you. As I gave the green plants, I have given you everything. However, you must not eat meat with its lifeblood in it, and I will require a penalty for your lifeblood. I will require it from any animal and from any human. If someone murders a fellow human, I will require that person's life. Whoever sheds human blood, by humans his blood will be shed, for God made humans in his image. But you, be fruitful and multiply. Spread out over the earth and multiply on it." And here's the covenant. Then God said to Noah and his sons with him, "Understand that I am establishing my covenant with you and your descendants after you, and with every living creature that is with you, birds, livestock, and all wildlife of the earth that are with you, all the animals of the earth that came out of the ark. I will establish my covenant with you that never again will every creature be wiped out by flood waters. There will never again be a flood to destroy the earth." And God said, "This is the sign of the covenant I am making between me and every living creature with you, a covenant for all future generations. I have placed my bow in the clouds, and it will be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Whenever I form clouds over the earth and the bow appears in the clouds, I will remember my covenant between me and you and all the living creatures. Water will never again become a flood to destroy every creature. The bow will be in the clouds, and I will look at it and remember the permanent covenant between God and all the living creatures on earth." God said to Noah, "This is the sign of the covenant that I have established between me and every creature on earth." So God begins by laying some ground rules for their starting civilization back up again, pretty much. And so God begins by laying some ground rules centered on care for human life due to them being made in the image of God, and then gives his promise. So in verses 1 and 7, you see a care for multiplying life. In verses 9, 2 through 4, you see a care towards sustaining life. In chapter 9, verses 5 through 6, protecting life. And also chapter 9, verses 8 through 17, enjoying life. Enjoying life, how we're meant to enjoy life in the way that God designed for it to be enjoyed. But before that, we have this kind of, I guess, transitional note towards that, finishing up chapter 8. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord. The first thing that he does after he gets off the ark is he worships God. He worships God. And just like the song that was just sang, it's like, though there's, there's the darkness of life, there's the world is dying, so to speak, all around you. We turn our eyes upwards. And so that's the first thing that Noah does when he comes off of the ark. He and his family worship first. He took some of every kind of clean animal, every kind of clean bird, and he offered burnt offerings on the altar. And so the Lord smells the pleasing aroma and says, I will never again curse the ground because of human beings. And this promise may be in reference to, the flood, not flooding the whole earth, flooding the ground, but also, and this seems to be my opinion, it could fulfill Lamech's promise. If you remember Lamech's promise to his son Noah, his hope for Noah was that he would bring relief from the toil caused by the cursed ground. And so the Lord says, here's your relief. Here's your relief. The effects of the curse, the weeds and the thistles, those remain. But for Noah, a man of the ground, the soil would be productive for him. Remember, they toiled, they worked the ground, they worked the earth. And also they had aid in when this wasn't a harvest time, that God says you can also eat these creatures. You don't have to just live off of the plants that I've provided. Spurgeon makes a note here, and I think it's an interesting note to make, that what God says here also when coming off the ark, when Noah comes off the ark, is he takes a minute to re-emphasize that you guys are still born with a marred sin nature. That hasn't gone away. You still have this inclination towards sin. Spurgeon says it like this: the inclination of the human heart is evil from youth onward. That's him quoting the passage. But he says, before the flood, in the 5th verse of the 6th chapter, it is written, the Lord saw that human wickedness was widespread on the earth, and that every inclination of the human mind was nothing but evil at the time. And you might remember me preaching on that. That's in this series. And he says, after the flood, it is just the same. The description in the 6th chapter belonged to the entire race. We might have hoped that after so terrible a judgment, when only a picked and peculiar few, that is 8, were saved from the water, that then as man began anew with a better stock, the old branches that were rotten being cut away, that now the nature of man would be improved. It is not so. The same God who, looking at man, declared that his imagination was evil before the flood, pronounces the same verdict on them afterwards. How hopeless is human nature. How impossible is it that the carnal mind should be reconciled to God. How necessary is it that he should give us new hearts and right spirits, seeing that the old nature is so evil. So there's this need for God before the flood, and there's a need for him just as much after the flood. Because though Noah and his family were righteous, that doesn't affect the fact that the heart is naturally inclined and bent towards evil. And you'll see that later on in Noah's life. But still, the answer remains, even those of us who claim righteousness are in Christ, our inclination is still bent towards evil. It's still bent towards sin. It's like you will still always hear the ring of sin. It's just you don't have to pick up the phone, right? That's sort of the idea. And so also we have this balance of, okay, human beings we are made with original sin, with a sin nature, but also we're also made in the image of God. And so we're still trying to balance these things just like we were in, I think it was Genesis 3, right? I will never again, I will never again curse the ground because of human beings, even though the inclination of the human heart is evil from youth onward. But also later on, we have the acknowledgement that human beings are made in the image of God. A.W. Tozer says in his book, The Knowledge of the Holy, the yearning to know what cannot be known, to comprehend the incomprehensible, to touch and taste the unapproachable, arises from the image of God and the nature of man. Deep calleth unto deep, and though polluted and landlocked by the mighty disaster theologians call the fall, the soul senses its origin and longs to return to its source. And so how do we reconcile these two ideas? Tozer gives us a visual aid in his other book, The Attributes of God. He gives us a picture of a vase that has held beautiful roses that is now broken. It will nevertheless, it will never hold something, even though broken, it will nevertheless hold something of the fragrance it once held. Right? And so though the image of God is broken by our sin nature, as we conform to that image of Christ over time via sanctification, we still hold something of a fragrance of that image. And God says that this is worth preserving, it is worth keeping, it is worth sustaining. The first note to multiply life is kind of bracketed in this first portion of Scripture before the covenant is given. In verses 1, you see it, and in verses 7, you see it again. God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. And again in verse 7, but you, be fruitful and multiply, spread out over the earth and multiply on it. The paragraph begins and ends with this, like bookends, a comment on the value of life. And why is this necessary? Well, think of the three boys, right? Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Think of Shem's line. Shem's line gives you Abraham, who founded, the Jewish nation. And you know who came from that Jewish nation? Jesus. So yeah, there's a need for them to be fruitful and multiply. And even though, this still speaks to us, even though we're not starting off the entire earth, right? To be fruitful and multiply, in that we can see through this passage that Scripture acknowledges children as a blessing. Scripture acknowledges children as a blessing. It pains me to see, if you've ever visited a church, ministers or churchgoers who complain when a kid starts crying or whining in church. It's so annoying. It's like, no, you're the kid who's actually crying and whining. They're just doing what they do, right? They're a blessing. When you hear a child being obnoxious in church, that's a blessing, quite honestly, because, hey, it's a child in church, and that means someone's doing something right. But if you're the one complaining about that, you're really the child complaining that I care about. Children are a blessing, and grandchildren are a living symbol of God's favor, scripturally. And why is that relevant? It's relevant, and it's relevant. This is the closest number I have, but in 2020, there were over 930,000 abortions in the U.S. Okay, well, let's talk about even life just generally. What about, in 2020, there were over 21,000 homicides in the U.S. That's just the U.S. alone. There doesn't seem to be much regard for the care of human life as a good thing, as a blessing. It seems like even other humans they consider it a nuisance. And I don't want to quote this individual as a window to any sort of political affiliation. I'm just saying this is a good comment, and I stand by it. I think it was Ronald Reagan who once said, notice how everyone who is pro-abortion has already been born. There's a robbing of human life that is happening before our eyes. And so this regard for being fruitful and multiply. Yeah, we're not starting off the entire planet, but I mean, even this far, it doesn't seem like there's much regard to this note. And it's an important note to make. It influences our theological anthropology elsewhere. We're not starting off the planet, but the basic rule to be fruitful and multiply still generally applies. You know, I remember, I was never one who, I never wanted kids growing up. I mean, I don't have any now, but I never wanted any until I met Kaylee, where I was like, this is, and maybe it's coming from a single parent home, but it seemed very out of reach. But when I was with her, it was just this is possible. And, and then her and I, we were watching, I think it was the Lord of the Rings series with some friends of ours. And once they found out, I was like, yeah, I don't think I want any. They paused the movie, or was it after the movie? But they were, they were evangelists right away. They were like, no, this is why kids are wonderful. They're a blessing of the Lord. It's something about $1 million in the quiver, and it's okay, but it worked. I was, sometimes you have to be willing to have your mind changed, but just like that, we should be evangelists for God's love and care for life, because people need it. People do need it. And it sounds silly, but you can be an evangelist for God's care and love for life. So God says, take note of this. And also, he then kind of transitions to saying, talking about sustaining it, loving it, to also sustain it. A common argument when we talk about anything pro-life is, well, if you're going to be pro-life, you better be, pro-life from beginning to end. And it's I agree. I 100% agree. And so you have verses 2 and through 4 that speak to sustaining life. God provides animals for them to consume and eat so that they are cared for. Right? The fear and terror of you will be in every living creature on earth, every bird of the sky, every creature that crawls on the ground, and all the fish of the sea. They're placed under your authority. Every creature that lives and moves will be food for you. As I gave the green plants, I have given you everything. The first explicit statement of this aspect of the human diet, right? The norm so far has been agricultural life, but that can't provide Noah and his children with sufficient food, especially in the first months of this, where departing from the ark, the harvest season hasn't even begun yet. Right, so they need something else, and God says, this is open to you now. This is open to you. And he does clarify, it doesn't come without stipulations. You must not eat meat with its lifeblood in it. Right, blood is a symbol of, it's a God given sign of life, right? So you have Leviticus 17:11, for the life of a creature is in the blood, and I have appointed it to you to make atonement on the altar for your lives, since it is the lifeblood that makes atonement. God, what are we saved by, right? By the holy sacrifice of Christ's blood shed, right? His life is offered to us so we might not have eternal death, right? God forbids his people to eat blood as a way of recognizing that life belongs to him. Leviticus 17. Let's go. I mentioned verse 11, but even 10 through 14. Anyone from the house of Israel or from the aliens who reside among them who eats any blood, I will turn against that person who eats blood and cut him off from his people. For the life of a creature is in the blood, and I have appointed it to you to make atonement on the altar for your lives, since it is the lifeblood that makes atonement. Therefore I say to the Israelites, none of you and no alien who resides among you may eat blood. A creature with the lifeblood in it. It's weird. When we read passages like this, it can sound very archaic and foreign to us, but it's helpful to acknowledge that symbols meant something, especially in a time, it's like, even burnt sacrifices can seem very archaic and weird to us. But if you look around you, there's not much that people take seriously in regards to being reverent or pious at all these days. And these people at least believed in something severely enough to acknowledge it so forwardly. And so there should be a level of respect, even though that this might seem like an archaic practice to us in our context. But right here, God is forbidding his people to eat a creature with its lifeblood still in it. And it remains a regulation through the Old Testament and into the New Testament. You've got Acts 15, 19 through 20. Therefore, in my judgment, we should not cause difficulties for those among the Gentiles who turn to God, but instead we should write to them to abstain from things polluted by idols, from sexual immorality, from eating anything that has been strangled, and from blood. That doesn't end. That's still the stipulation today. Kaylee and I, sometimes when God provides, though, you have to just say, it's like, okay, we were fed, right? And Kaylee and I had that encounter last weekend. We're Domino's people, but we ordered Papa John's. It was a big mistake. It's not close. I think I lifted the pizza up and just everything just slid off. It was like one of those, if you've ever seen this is so gross, I'm going to say it anyway, but it is, those commercials where it's like, I'm Amanda and I lost 37 pounds on Nutrisystem. I found it. It was all on my plate. It's so gross. Awful. And yeah, don't make that transition, but, sorry, that's so gross. But, order Domino's. You'll never order another pizza. That's called the domino effect. Anyway, but we had to, we came away from that and we just said, you know what? We were fed. It's like we were fed. That happened. We'll try our best to forget that it happened, but we were fed, right? And look at verse 3. Every creature that lives and moves will be food for you. As I gave the green plants, I have given you everything. I've given you everything. Sometimes we live in such extravagant lives without even realizing it. And when I say extravagant lives, immediately we're like, yeah, not me. But truly, we live such extravagant lives often without realizing it, realizing how blessed we are. And instead of dwelling too much on what we lack, we need to be able to look sometimes at the simple places in our lives where we're fed. It's like, I didn't get through this month easy, but we got through this month. I've got my family, we've got what we need, we were fed, we're good. God's got us. And that's more than enough. That's more than enough. Also, there's a general call presented here that I think to love one another as the Lord loves humanity here, right? Humanity has all that it needs because God has provided it. However, not all of humanity has access to it. And so giving to world missions, things like that, is a way in which we love them as the Lord has loved humanity. And so there's a model here, and this is why that sort of thing is necessary. Oftentimes we can just be like, well, as long as we're doing our thing in the local community, it's like we're still missionaries, and that's true. But there are a lot of people who don't have what we have, and so there you can look for little ways to do so. So God speaks to multiplying life. He speaks to sustaining life. But he also speaks to protecting life. It's weird. There's a lot of random notes here in this message, but I think it speaks to a lot of different things. Why would God make such notes when beginning all of humanity? Something to wonder. Protecting life. You see this in verses 5 and 6 of chapter 9. I will require a penalty for your lifeblood. I will require it from any animal and from any human. If someone murders a fellow human, I will require that person's life. God will hold responsible each human being who takes the life of another. Nobody gets away with it. Verse 6 says, whoever sheds human blood, by humans his blood will be shed, for God made humans in his image. A note to make here that's kind of important is that, and I've been asked this before, there's a difference between murder and killing. You say, well, is this hypocritical for God to say when he just wiped out the entire earth? Think of the entire earth. They were evil. They were antithetical to his ways and his design. And what he did was he protected his people. He loved his people. And sometimes that means his almighty wrath and judgment to protect his people. And I preached that whole sermon on that. It was actually an act of love, his wrath. But also there's a difference between murder and killing. What's being talked about here is murder. If you murder someone else, it's like that same penalty is attributed to you. So one, we have a biblical case for capital punishment. Even in the Old Testament, you see kinsman redeemers for tribes. If someone would do something wrong, the kinsman redeemer would, redeem the situation, right? Whether it was even kidnapping or someone stole something, it would be his responsibility to get it back. So murder is towards the innocent, it is undeserved, whereas killing is justified. It is usually in protection of self. So you can think of in times of war, or police officers have to do this, or home. If someone comes into your home, you have to protect your family. This is a biblical case for that. It's not the same as murdering someone. You're protecting. But what is being spoken about here is murder. And for that, God says he offers pretty much what is capital punishment, and says this is what you are to do, because you have to protect people. And whenever I think that's brought up, the question is, well, what if that person isn't saved? And my answer would be, I would answer that question with another question. Well, what if all the people that they harm aren't saved also? So it's like you have to protect more people. So there is a biblical case for this. You have the freedom to disagree. There's points on each end, but I think this provides a biblical case for that. Protecting life. Another way that God shows his care for it and love for humanity. Multiplying life, sustaining life, protecting life. And finally, in his covenant, he gives us sort of his stamp to enjoy life in him, according to his design. Right, so in verses 8 through 11, you see that this covenant that he offers is a covenant with creation, which is an interesting thing to know, that you'll know alongside his offer to humanity. He offers this to creation. Where is it? Chapter 9, verses 8 through 11, sorry. Then God said to Noah and his sons with him, "Understand that I am establishing my covenant with you and your descendants after you, and with every living creature that is with you, birds and livestock and all wildlife of the earth that are with you, all the animals of the earth that came out of the ark. I'll establish my covenant with you." So the creatures are kind of alongside Adam and his family with this. And that's a weird thing, right? You'd think, well, God makes covenants with people. But this is extended to creation. Why? Well, think of what creation is to God. It's sort of like his worship team. All of it redounds to his glory. If you're not looking at the loveliness of creation and thinking, what a wonderful God we serve, then you're looking at creation wrong. And you're looking at creation without an appreciation for the Creator. You know, you're looking at a painting without thinking, like, what a talented artist. And that's a problem because it mimics the reaction of the world to creation, where it's like, look at what they do. They worship things rather than their Creator. And you're kind of doing the same when you don't acknowledge the Creator over the creation. So creation lifts our eyes upwards. Kaylee actually does this for me a little bit, which I think also separates her, where it's like, just how you can look at like a beautiful mountain range or something like that and think like, what a lovely God we serve. Like sometimes Kaylee will like be like putting her shoes on or like doing something random, and I look at her, I'm just like, what a lovely God I serve. You know, that he created her. You know, so our spouses should do that for one another. Our family should do that one another. Every aspect of creation, human or you know, the beautiful scenery around us, it all redounds to the glory of God. All redounds to the glory of God. It is like a good sermon, right? That we leave it and think, what an amazing God we serve. The Westminster Shorter Catechism, I'm not Presbyterian, but the Westminster Shorter Catechism follows this. It says, it's a kind of question response. It says, what is man's chief end? And it answers, man's chief end is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. These things are meant so that we might enjoy God. This covenant is for the enjoyment of life in the way that God designed it, and in a way that points towards him. So it is not only a covenant with creation, but it is a covenant with a sign. And that's in verses 12 through 17, right? You should know that one, with the bow in the sky. Right? It's common for there to be a visual symbol given to a covenant between God and man. You have the Abrahamic covenant, made visible by circumcision. You have the Mosaic covenant at Sinai with the weekly Sabbath. This is common. I mean, you make promises and you shake hands on it all the time, right? It's helpful to have a visual of your promise. All right, look at verse 15, 9:15. I will remember my covenant between me and you and all the living creatures. Water will never again become a flood to destroy every creature. That's the promise. That's the covenant being made. And it's necessary. Like, imagine if, let's say Elijah gets like a big Lego set. Name him a Lego set. What's one? Do a Star Wars one. Millennium Falcon? Let's say he gets a big Lego set of the Millennium Falcon, right? But he doesn't want to assemble it the way that the directions say to assemble it. He wants to assemble it however he wants, right? Let's say I come in and I'm like, that's not the directions, right? I bought you this Lego set, so that you would make it how I've given you and designed for it to be made, right? So I break it. So like I break whatever he's created. Because I'm so frustrated by the fact that you're doing something so otherly, right? This is wrong, and so I break it. Now I say, okay, build it right. What's he going to say? He's going to say, well, how do I know you're not going to just break it again? No. This is where the metaphor falls short, because I would. But, but what if I say, okay, I'll shake on it? Then he has some sort of guarantee that I'm not going to break that again. Does that make sense? And so that, listen, you don't have to be worried about me breaking this thing again. You can enjoy playing. You just enjoy playing. But acknowledge the grace I'm giving you to enjoy playing. And it's like, play right, and you get all the blessings of getting to play with that right, which is way better than just playing with it random, right, when you have that finished product. And play wrong, and you'll never get to see what's meant to be. You'll never get to see what I want for you. And a weird note to make, but it is worth making. This is why the pride flag is so blatantly evil. Because first it's the pride, right? So it's admittingly say, well, I'm going to design this thing by my own rules. I'm going to make this thing by my rules. I think my rules are better than yours, actually. I think my way of building this thing is better. Stealing the symbol of God's grace towards humanity. Right? So taking his grace for granted. And where Paul says, should we sin all the more so that grace should abound? Or should it have to all the more abound? And they would say, yeah. And in the meanwhile, they warp another covenant between God and mankind. So it is why this is so blatantly evil. Right? And so now you see why God made it a point to start this thing off by addressing our sin nature. Maybe you've been to a family reunion where that one family member comes and they say, okay, this is all about me now. Have you ever, I don't know, maybe you have that individual in your family or that one family from your family that comes into a family reunion and is like, it's all about me now. It's like if this doesn't go my way, it's not going to go your way. And that's sort of the pride that is brought into this situation. It's like, listen, it's all about me now.
We had a family reunion yesterday, and we had about 30 or 40 people.
That is a really...
Our reunion.
Well, that sounds like a blessing to have that many people. The note here, to finish, I'll just say this. We who are in God can enjoy him, his favor, his blessings, and his design for life, even when the rains come, and on afterwards. Does that make sense? There's a call here to play by the rules, the right way, and to see his design for you, his blessing for you, and his intention for creation. His care for life. And you can live into that. I know it's been all over the place, but he shows that in many ways, and he's establishing whole culture. So it makes sense that it would be all over the place. There's a lot of rules to apply. But we can share in this as God's people, attempting to live and commit to that image, his image. Let's pray.